Hello, dear chess lovers. Sometimes there are some games that you see in chess history that changes how you see the game of chess. It has such an impact on you that your mental models change. You have a different vision. You build the entire game. All your assumptions about the game turns out to be wrong. I will show you one of those games that had similar impact on me. After I looked at this game for the first time, I understood that you cannot judge a position purely by counting material, and piece values change depending on the position. You cannot always judge knights to be 3 pawns, rooks to be 5 pawns. Sometimes a knight can be more powerful than a rook, and that can remain to be the case long term. I'm not only talking about tactical ideas, short term advantages, but sometimes you can build a position, sometimes you can establish a great piece that turns out to be much stronger than the rook. And you can also bury the enemy pieces using your pawns. This game is one of those games that's a classic, chess classic by Garry Kasparov against a very strong player, Alexei Shirov. Some of you might know this game. It will be a nice repetition for you. For those of you who doesn't know the game, please enjoy this beauty. I will stop at the key moments. I will ask you to find Gary's moves, and I will explain why those moves are played. So even if you're a beginner player, please stay with this video because I will explain the thought processes behind those decisions. I'm sure this game will have instructional value for all of you chess lovers out there. Most importantly, please enjoy and know what a beautiful game chess is. Okay? e4, c5, Gary with the white pieces. We end up in a Sicilian battle, which will soon transpose into a Sveshnikov kind of structure. After knight b5, d6, bishop f4 signifies this plan of forcing e5. Thus, we achieved a typical Sveshnikov main line, which is characterized by a hole on d5. That's an outpost on d5, right? That's a clear long-term edge for white, advantage for white. But black also has good central control or in return for that weakness on d5, right? That will be a very sharp Sicilian battle waiting us, folks. Knight a3, b5. This pawn is really shutting off that knight, and also black is a threat of b4 right now. Thus, white goes knight d5 in its position. Pinning the pin knight on f6 is already pressurized. We are still following Sveshnikov main line. The main move is bishop takes f6, removing the piece that was fighting for d5. That's a game plan for white, by the way, folks. Now, white's beautiful knight on d5 established on that amazing square, but black has the bishop pair in return, okay? Bishop b7, knight c2. Gary is improving his worst place piece. That knight on a3 was a terrible piece. Now that knight is potentially eyeing a3, followed by establishing itself on this outpost on d5. So strategical plans are already taking shape in this position. White is having static advantages, while black is relying on bishop pair and also later push pawn breaks like f5 in this structure. Shirov chooses the plan of knight b8, activating bishop, but also that knight is going to d7 to maybe later on establish itself on f6 or maybe on c5, right? To put pressure in the center. That's a very logical plan, albeit a little bit too slow. It allows white in pushing a4, and this way Gary wants to activate the bishop by putting pressure on the pawn on b5. Thus, after takes, knight d7, we end up in this position, folks. And Gary plays the move rook b4. This looks like a strange move at first sight, no? This rook b4 move. What's going on here? I mean, we haven't even castled our king. Why are we playing with our rook that early on the queen side? Well, he's asking a very simple question. Do you exchange my knight for a good bishop, thus establishing a piece on d5 like that? Or do you rather defend your bishop this way? Shirov goes knight c5, which turns out to be a positional mistake. And it's up to you to prove this, folks. What did Garry Kasparov play in this position with the white pieces? I'm sure many of you have seen this game before, so that will come easy for you. But if you have never seen this game before, please take a step back, give yourself 5 to 10 minutes, positional evaluation, please. Surprising looking resource for white. Can you find that beautiful positional operation that was found by Garry Kasparov in this game? You're a great player. You found Garry Kasparov's positional exchange sacrifice. Rook takes b7. And this move will change your chess perception. You will see the true depth of chess by deeply analyzing this exchange sacrifice. Why does he give up his rook for the bishop on b7, folks? And can you tell me what is white's next move? That's a critical follow-up. Rook takes b7. How do you bury and shut down that knight from the game? That's my prompt to you. Yes, he goes b4, folks, and we say goodbye to that fianchetto knight on b7. I made a course about this, the art of burying pieces, and this knight will be shut down from the game forever. So Gary's game plan is to remove the good bishop, which was fighting for the key d5 outpost, and to give black a buried knight on b7. Going back, you see the vision of a grandmaster, you see the positional judgment of a grandmaster, and you see how he transforms material to reach the positional goals. Like once you evaluate this position, once you understand that everything is taking place on this key d5 outpost, it makes perfect sense to remove pieces that are fighting for d5, right? Plus, chess patterns. Fianchetto knights in chess can be easily buried by pawns, just like here. That knight is a terrible creature, and also look at the knight on d5, right? White has given himself an amazing and eternal knight on d5, which can later be even supported by the other knight. So from now on, the game is becoming purely strategic dominance for white. Yes, we give up the exchange, but who cares? Can really tell me, can really call this rook as a more active piece than the knight on d5? I don't think so. How about this rook on h8? No. Yes, black has 2 rooks right now. You only have 1 rook. But does it matter? No. And Gary's judgment is correct. Now we are talking about evaluation stage, right? A master judges this position to be better for white. And later Stockfish agreed, of course, right? They're agreeing, of course, with white's judgment here. But I can explain to you. I can use words to explain why white is so much better. Look at the bishop as well. That's a terrible bishop, terrible knight, right? Weak pawn on d6, also on a6. Rooks are not doing nothing. So if you combine all these things, you understand that's much worse than an exchange. Yes, we are down an exchange, but we have great compensation for that. Plus, bishop c4s are coming and will slowly activate all of our pieces. I will show you how the game went, folks. Bishop c5, knight a3. He's placing the other knight on this beautiful c4 square. Light square domination, right? Because we removed black's light square bishop. Now light squares has become ours. So that's the justification of placing his knights on those light squares. Just look at those knights, folks. And you see, he doesn't hurry with castling short because his king is still safe in the center of the board. a5 comes my question. Do you think we should take on a5 or should we wait for black in capturing on b4? Obviously, right? This knight is a buried piece because of a pawn on b4. So no trade on a5. That would be a chess crime to take on a5 and awaken that knight on that c5 square, right? Of course, no take. He activates the bishop, he develops the piece, and gets ready for castle short. A takes b4. Of course, he takes back with the pawn, and that knight on b7 is a buried creature still in his position. Please focus on the piece harmony for white. h4, stock standard move that asks black bishop to choose. Do you choose this diagonal or this diagonal? He chooses this one. The problem is that the bishop is also giving away some control of those dark squares by going that way, right? And also he continues with the move knight b6. Gary doesn't hurry with castling short. He also signifies the move knight d7, folks. Rook a2 hits the d2 square. Thus, Gary castles short in his position. He allows rook d2, but after queen f3, the bishop is guarded by the queen. And again, white is great play on those light squares. Never forget about the knight on b7. That's the story of this entire game, folks. Queen a7, slowly activating his pieces, comes knight d7, and here Shirov goes wrong, folks, in this position. I'll show you what a difficult task was waiting him. The only move that keeps black in the game was rook a8, folks. Rook a8 was the only move, but at first sight, it looks ridiculous because you're allowing knight e7 check, followed by queen takes f7, no? I mean, look at my pieces. And look at your king, a lonely creature on that spot. And yes, you can take on d3, but this allows me to play knight f8, and now you're facing enormous threats like queen g8 mate. It looks like I have 3 attackers, we have only 1 defender, should be game over. But black has one move that keep them in the game. Can you tell me, folks, the threat you're facing is queen g8 mate, and there's only one way for black to stop that threat. You're a great player if you found the move queen a2, which had to be seen 5 moves earlier for black. You can imagine what a difficult task that is in a practical game, right? But queen a2 stops queen g8 mate, thus keeps black in the game. It doesn't even end there because here white can throw this check on g6, takes, king h7. At the very least, white has this perpe. If black takes on f8, then I will take on f8. And if you take on f8, sorry, if you take on f8, then I take on a2, right? You can never take on f8. And this is only one way that white can force a perpetual in this position. Plus, white can also play moves like this. Queen f5 also threatens mate in 1. Black has to play the only move g6. And now queen f6 checks are allowed. Bishop g7 checks are allowed. You see what a difficult task was waiting black to defend that position. And Shirov did wrong. Shirov went wrong, and Shirov couldn't find this accurate defense. I will show you how the game went. But you see, this is still a draw for black, but he has to calculate all these things in a practical game before he chooses the move rook a8 in his position. It's such a difficult task to defend like that, right? So he chose knight d8. That's a very, very bad move because, well, first you're losing an exchange. White regains material equality. The problem is this knight is 10 times stronger than your knight on d8. My king is safer, and now white also is beautiful and very strong passed pawn on the b file, right? So now you can evaluate this position normally, normal judgment, right? Equal material. Then you look at piece activity, you look at king safety, you look at quality like the pawn on b5. White has a big advantage. Shirov tried queen a3. He wants the queen trade somehow, but Kasparov's seen further. You can maybe stop the video and find Kasparov's active operation. He doesn't want to go for a queen trade. Well, he says, my queen can go for a counterattack, but how? You're a great player. You found the move queen f5, folks, and now the queen is infiltrating on d7 to exploit the situation of the black king, and now the queen and knight will combine as a great attacking duo to create damage to the black king. King e8 was chosen. If you take the bishop, then queen d7 is on the board, creating multiple threats like this, and black cannot survive. Your knight will be lost, plus this check will be allowed, plus b6 is coming. You see, white is completely winning this position. After queen f8, king e8 was the game continuation, but here again, right, it allows Kasparov to activate the bishop on c4, and again, if you focus on the piece activity, the situation is so clear. White is winning. He's even going for this line now. Actually, he's sacrificing the bishop, but queen is invading via g8, and comes the next move, of course, knight b6. Great calculation by Garry Kasparov that wins the exchange. Suddenly, it's white who has the extra exchange in this position, right? Crystal clear advantage. Queen c5. Well, even here, right, Garry, instead of defending the knight by retreat, he looks at this rook on f1. That's the worst place piece. Can you tell me, folks, how should we activate our worst place piece on f1? You're a great player if you found Garry's move rook a1, activation, active defense, instead of passively retreating the knight which was hanging. Queen d4 was chosen. If you take my knight in this position, by the way, if you take on c4, you allow rook a7 check. You see where it's coming, right? The knight is hanging with check. white has extra exchange plus all the advantages. Queen d2 is just one line. White is winning in all these lines. Queen f3 creates enormous threats, and black has no defense against this. So after rook a1, he tried queen d4, and the end is near. He tries rook a3, folks. That's a great move as well. Well, simply he wants to go knight e3 followed by knight f5. He sets this little tactic. After bishop c1 comes Gary's next move. Active counterattack is the best defense. He goes knight e3, and he signifies this small threat of knight f5 check. Thus, black has no time for this, right? Because then you lose like this. And if you take my knight, then simply take back with the rook, and white is winning. Extra exchange plus the pass pawn on b5 plus the terrible knight remains on the board. The black king is more exposed, and the game is over. So Shirov resigned after the move knight e3 in its position, and Garry Kasparov won one of the most beautiful games probably in his chess career. At least the game that had lasting impact on many players, including me. If you go to the critical position, folks, I will show you again, right? That moment of rook b4 and take on b7 end up in many textbooks in chess, and this is a move that can change your chess perception, right? So that's why we need to learn those patterns, because it's difficult to invent them in actual game. But if you know the existence of this pattern, if you know this game by heart, then these ideas will come to your mind more naturally in the actual games. That's the function of studying such chess classics. Can you really understand the gist of the sacrifice? Can you explain this to yourself, all the logical steps? Can you understand the multi-purposeness of this idea? Then you have a higher chance in applying this to your games. You will never achieve the same position in your game probably, but you will have something similar in those positions. At least then you should generate more candidate moves for yourself to choose from. And that's such a lovely sacrifice that stabilized our knight on d5, that buried the knight on b7, and Garry played the move very quickly in the game. That was a prep. That was a very smart prep. And that's why in this position, they no longer defend their bishop with the knight, but they choose the move rook b8 in this position, right? Of course, because they want to have a good knight on d7. They don't want to have a buried piece on b7. That's a much better way for black to defend the bishop. So it usually goes like this, castle, castle, and the game is balanced, because the game is balanced because knight is still alive in this position. And if you take the exchange again, right? Well, if you sack the exchange again, then it's not the same, because that knight will have good pastures in this position. Plus, the rook is also hitting the pawn on b2. It's not the same position. In this case, knight c5 is a bad move because it allows an exchange sack and also leaves that knight on a terrible spot. Incredible how that knight never managed to activate itself from this position, right? Talking about those long-term burial patterns, Garry did not give them any chance to activate that piece. By timely actions, by activating every single piece very quickly, right? Also, this game shows us the value of active defense as best form of defense in chess, right? Counterattack. He was never taking any, time to passively defend his stuff, but he was always choosing those active operations. And again, this game shows us once again how difficult defending is in chess. Shirov need to find this only move rook a to survive that hinges on calculating so many venomous moves like this. In those lines, looks lost for black, but black is alive because of a couple of only moves, basically, right? A couple of only moves, machine defenses with moves like this was very difficult to spot from far away. That's why Garry was a very dangerous player with attacking chances, with initiative, right? It was difficult to resist his piece activity. And once again, we show the strength of a knight on d5 in the Sicilian Sveshnikov with a pass pawn on b5. There's no turning back, right? So this game, hopefully, folks, if you go back to that position, by the way, yeah, rook b4, knight c5 moment, these sacrifices can change your mental models in chess, can make you appreciate the game even more, right? Because the game cannot be reduced to a single material dimension. Knights don't always worth 3 pawns. Rooks don't always worth 5 pawns. Can really call this knight on d5 in this position that is worth only 3 pawns. If it's 3 pawns, then how valuable is this knight on b7 after b4, right? Please compare this knight on d5 with the knight on b7. Can you really call them of equal value? After you deeply study this game, the answer should be no, right? So that's what we are learning in those classical games. Thus, this way we are treating our pieces nicely. We don't only judge and evaluate positions in terms of generic piece values, but our positional play improves, and we don't miss on such chances in burying the enemy pieces like that, right? We're also learning those recurrent chess patterns, positional chess patterns this way, right? That's why I show you this multi-purpose and beautiful chess classic, folks. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can crash your opponents with some beautiful positional exchange sacrifices like this, because winning games like this, to me, gives the most joy and satisfaction. Imagine you win a game like that. Long-term burial, slow grind, exchange sacrifices. This game will remain with you for the rest of your life. You can show this game to your grandchildren. And that's why these games are beautiful for us to watch and appreciate the true beauty of chess. If you like this video, folks, please give me a like and subscribe. That's very important for me to produce similar content for you. I'm doing it to help you improve your game. And I will catch you on the next episode with another chess classic that was important for us to change our mental models and love the game even more. Bye-bye.